Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stumble In Chat Podcast with your host, me, Denny Cool. What a great week so far this has been. The weather has just been amazing. It's actually been a little bit warmer this time of April than it typically has been. Nonetheless, it is still nice. Let me adjust my microphone here a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, so that I'm not straining my neck here. I'm using this little mini stand right here that John brought over with him. But anyways, it's nice to be here. I missed last week. I couldn't do a podcast last week, so I was kind of bummed out about it. But sometimes things happen, and I'm able to do it tonight. And of course, a lot of times I don't do a lot of advertising in advance. I just kind of throw it out last minute, maybe the day of, typically. But that's done with intention. I don't want to bombard members and everybody with too much stuff because we do have a lot of things going on. So they will be getting a lot of emails this week. But again, welcome. I hope everybody's enjoying their day if they can. Tonight is going to be really cool, and I probably touched on this prior in some other form or the other, and the reason that I love doing the Talk podcast, aside from, well, now we have the radio show, which is every Sunday from 5 to 8, where it's all members music for 3 hours, and that's really cool. There's no video of me. I don't interact with chat, but it's all our members. We go back several years, play some of their music. Maybe we featured them on a particular show. We'll pull stuff from there, and then we'll put it on the radio show. And that's pretty cool too. It's 3 hours of relaxing. There's no hype, nothing. It's just members' music, which is what I love to do. And of course, it just gives a lot of respect to the artist and the members alike. And the podcast I love doing because there's a side of me that a lot of people, especially the members, don't get to see. And that side is what I do on the Talk podcast, or the Chat podcast, rather. Friday nights are fun. They're a fun show. It's kind of a let loose, be as you are type of show. And it requires me to focus on the show, the production of it, the operations of it, as to where I don't really have to do a lot of thinking per se. So I'm kind of just enthralled with the music, the members, and just having a good time. But I do get this quite a bit. A lot of people are surprised, or they assume I don't know or I'm not aware of a lot of the music or artist. And I'll leave that as a secret, I suppose. You may think I do, or you may think I don't. But here's a little hint. I've been in music since I can remember. So if I don't know anything about music or the artist, and I don't know everything, but if I don't, well, then, I don't know. We'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it as a mystery. But the point of me doing the podcast is I get to share my opinions and thoughts on different views, different topics that I find interesting. Or maybe there's some stories out there, nothing political or anything, but just it could be off the wall things, right? We did Flat Earth, the one before that, which is pretty cool. I did a episode about that, and I did a lot of research after that, because before it, I was trying to research as much as I could. There's a flat earth theory going back 17 CE. I mean, it's old. But I did more research after the podcast as well over the next few days, because I was going to do a part 2 but I found it to be just pointless. I really did. Now, many of you watched the Artemis 2. They went around the moon. Now, there's before I get into the actual deep root of tonight's episode, so already there's conspiracy of, well, they really didn't do that. They had cable cars, 5 of them, I think, 4 of them, that were shuttled down from the tower where the rocket launches, okay? And the cable cars removed the astronauts down to the ground, and the rocket took off. And they're saying that's what really happened. And they really didn't do that. They didn't go around the moon, humans, that they faked it. I'm thinking to myself, well, that don't make any sense, because why would, if the astronauts weren't on the rocket to begin with, why would they have to put them in cable cars and trolley them down from the top? Why wouldn't they just go inside the tower, right, and stay there in the first place? Or I guess because they have to have physical evidence where they're actually walking across the catwalk, I guess, to go inside the rocket. I don't know. But even still, that doesn't make any sense. So it goes to show you. Now, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't prove they did or didn't. But that'd be just an elaborate scheme, really, to pull off, just to say, hey, we sent 4 people the furthest we've ever been around the moon. Now, of course, the first one was that men never really stepped foot on the moon. That was all theatrics. So, again, guys, I don't know. I'm just touching off some stuff that I kind of hit a little bit on the week before on that podcast about the flat Earth, which listen, I don't know, but when I see these images from space, and I'm looking at a circular shape, that being of the Earth, that looks to be round. I don't know how that can kind of distort or contort into something flat or diamond-shaped. But I don't know. Anyways, I wanted to get started off that, just to get that off my chest. I was thinking about that, and I'm like, man, already there's conspiracies about the people actually going around the moon. Now, again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't testify to that. But, again, it seems far-fetched to really make something up like that. But, hey, who knows, right? Anyways, tonight, it's pretty cool. It may seem like a boring topic to many, but it's all about communicating, and then it's action-reaction, right? I love talking about this stuff, and you may ask yourself, well, that's boring. Like, I want to hear something about Bigfoot or aliens. Yeah, sure, but that could be just as boring too, because the media's flooded with it. Go anywhere, Facebook, YouTube, wherever it is. It's flooded with that stuff. Now, not that I don't find it intriguing, but I don't want to keep repeating the same stuff over and over again that millions of other people are doing. And let's be honest, with the advanced AI now, don't you get tired of sometimes you just want to find a cool video, something authentic, right? Maybe it's a wild animal, a wolf or something. Next thing you know, you're coming across these videos of a gorilla fighting a mountain lion and beating the crap out of it. And it's like, come on, guys, huh? Enough. AI is great to do creative things and everything else. I'm all for that. But there's a point, too, where it's like, oh, man, I'm so sick and tired of looking at it. And they try to pull it off as if it's real. Or you see these muscle men that are like 15 feet tall. I seen one, he was handcuffed, and the cop's like, hey, big fella, you're not going to give us a problem now, are you? And he's like, "Rrr." I mean, come on. If any of that crap was real, guys, okay, you honestly don't think that'd be headlines? A giant man with muscles the size of your entire body just on one bite. I mean, come on. It doesn't exist. If it did, it'd be on the news. I mean, I've seen less of things that made headlines. That's just my opinion. But, yeah, sometimes you get tired of that stuff, man. And the reason I say it, a lot of people think or may assume that, well, what fun is it? What's interesting about talking about communicating? Action, reaction. Ooh, what is that? Well, it plays an active role in your everyday life. It's very important to things that you do or don't do. It dictates your outcomes in many things. It can be the positive in relationships, whether that be marriage, friendships, families. It can play a huge role in your attitude. It can. There's so many different things that communication, action, reaction can do, and has an effect on you, and you may not even realize it. And again, I'm no doctor. I'm no person with any type of PhD certificates and all that stuff. I'm your average Joe or your average Denny Cool that gets intrigued by these things. And so I read and I research and then I read more and then I like to share what I know. And just because I share my opinions and thoughts, it doesn't make me right. It means, here's what I think. Here's my opinion. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What's your opinions on this stuff? And that's what I love to learn. I love to get feedback from others. Whether I agree with them or not, it's not about me disagreeing with people. We can disagree all day long. But that's what having an open discussion about chatting is all about. Now, there's a difference when somebody disagrees with you and you become hostile, or you shut down, or you're not open for communication, right? Meaning it's your thought, your opinion, and that's it. And I'm going to share some things. A lot of stuff I read, not all, but a lot that I read, comes from a lot of college stuff. Example, this is the 5th edition. Now, I've had this book for quite some time, but it's called Communicating in Groups, and it's quite fascinating. It's the pro-college edition, and there's a lot of good points in here. Now, I don't use this as my guiding light for communicating. No, I reference from it and I read, and a lot of times there's some good exercises in here that I think could be helpful if applied the right way. But I also think too that textbook style information on whether it be one's habits, how to treat another person, or how to act. I think that in my best evaluation of that stuff is that you have to not take everything to heart. But you should also look at things and read and then maybe take away and apply what you can. But I personally wouldn't do it verbatim, unless, of course, it's vital to you. If there's information there that you say, you know what, all right, that's a good thing, that makes sense, right? But meaning, in other words, textbooks, whether they're written by, professors or psychiatrists, counselors, what have you, I think, in my opinion, that they're from what I read from a lot of these books, is that it's really meant to kind of just guide, but it's their opinion. It doesn't make it a fact, especially when it comes about communicating. I think that communication, it's not something that you can learn how to do from a book. Now, you can apply tools from a book that help you, say, with business or a meeting or certain things on ways to approach or ways to communicate. But I think on a personal level, okay, I think you have to learn that. Hey, Paula. Paula just commented when I was talking about the chat. She says, AI is a tool which is helpful. It isn't human. That's 100%. And it doesn't have emotion and the ability to create as a human. AI does not embody divinity as we do. You know what, Paul? You're right. And not to make it about AI, but you're actually touching on in tonight's topic. So when Paula says that it isn't human, it doesn't have emotion and the ability to create as a human. Well, take that. Now, I want everybody to think about, if you haven't, I'll be surprised, but you hear stories now, whether it's on the news, radio, whether you read about it, about people building a relationship with AI technology, whether that's ChatGPT, Gork, whatever it is. There's several out there, but they create a relationship and build a bond. And in their mind, they're communicating with this artificial intelligence, right? This program. And to Paula's point, AI, it isn't human. Well, what is it? How can it respond back to something I ask it, whether that be by chat or voice? How does it respond? What's programmed to? And then a lot of people argue and say, well, and I'm getting off the beaten path a little bit here, but that's okay, because it kind of ties into it. Excuse me. How can AI be empathetic? And then one side will argue and say, oh, it's almost there. No, it's not. The expression or the emotion that you think you're hearing. Now, I'm no programmer. I'm not an expert on AI or the technology used to create it. I have some understanding of it. However, I'm going to apply common sense, and I'm going to apply general rule here, which is what Paula just said. It isn't human. Why is that important? And why is that important with tonight's topic? Well, tonight's topic is about communicating and about action reaction. So let's use AI for an example. When people argue that it's very close to having emotion or it's almost there, I stand firm on what I think, and that is impossible. It can't be done. When you have a response, whether it's from any of the, I don't know, it could be Google, Alexa, whatever it is, Gronk, ChatGPT, I don't know, there's tons of them. The response may sound emotional, like there's emphasis, there's empathy, but it's programmed to respond that way. Okay, it's programmed to, when a certain word is triggered, it will react, and it's programmed to react a certain way, whether that means it's taking that generated tone, it's elevating it, or it's lowering it. And I'm just giving basic examples. So if you say to your AI model, hey, I'm having a really bad day today, and it says, oh, I'm so sorry. Or if it were just to say, oh, I'm so sorry, there's a difference, because it will pick up on that word, those keys, and how you're saying it, and then it responds in kind. And here's the problem with the action and reaction when it comes to communicating with things such like AI. You're creating an action. What is that action? And that action is you're creating what you think to be a bond, right? You think you're creating a relationship, a trust, versus human. Now, the reaction to that, okay, you can flip it. Let's reverse this. Let's go reaction, action. Let's reverse it with this AI. So you're communicating with this AI, and your reaction is just that. You think you're creating a relationship, a bond, this trust, right, with this AI model. The action then is the consequence. That down the road, when this no longer becomes reality to you, or that this, you need further vindication, or you need more emotion, more compassion, the consequence, the action of that, because of your reaction, how you're engaging with this thing, how you think you're communicating with it, the outcome is the devastating actions that's caused by this. And so many people go through this because they get lost in this pretend communication, this pretend trust, this pretend relationship, this pretend friend, which doesn't exist in reality. It doesn't exist. It's there technologically, but the reality of it is it's not there. You can't touch it. You can't hold it. You can't hug it. And so, therefore, it's an obsolete thing. What happens when you shut the computer off or the battery dies, right? It's obsolete. It doesn't exist. And so I think that you can reverse that versus saying action, reaction. I think you can reverse it and say reaction, action, because you're reacting to something that it's not there. And I've had these discussions with people before. And I'm perplexed to hear some of the responses and what some people feel, or how attached they are to this technology, you know. And I understand the attachment to it, because unlike trying to communicate with a human being, there's really no argument. There's no disagreement unless there's a factual base for it. Meaning, if you're asking it a fact, or you're asking it something, and it gives back an actual fact, because it's programmed to do that, and then you disagree with it, well, guess what? There's like no argument there, right? Because if you stop talking, it stops talking. If you tell it to do something programmably, it does it. So it's weird in a sense, but it's also, I also understand it, because some people, they can't relate or talk to other humans. They have a very, very difficult time doing that. And again, you know, I'm no professional, so I don't understand how to put that into technical words, if you will. All right. But from what I understand, everything I read, when communication drops, and it drops so low, and you stop communicating with other people, it can lead to things like isolation, low mood, increased stress, even impact the physical health over time. People who isolate themselves, they become very depressed, right? They're kind of stressed out, like they're high-wired. They're little things, certain or many things are trigger objects for them. And that's been proven time and time again. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. But if you don't communicate with other people, I think that isolation can really trigger a lot of bad things. And I also think, too, that if you have what they call healthy solitude, so taking time alone to think, perhaps recharge, focus, as many say, work on yourself, right? Now, that's a huge difference between isolating yourself. A short, temporary solitude is different than isolating yourself. And if you take a break from, communicating or just not having any conversation with people, because maybe the topic, subjects, or what it is that you want to talk about or that you like to discuss, you find it may be difficult for you to accept others' opinions solely based off of your firm belief, right? And so it's okay, I think, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm not a doctor. Don't take my professional advice here, because there is none. But healthy solitude, a break, from everything I've read and understood from professionals, allegedly, and I'll tell you what I mean by allegedly, is that it is good to do that. You have to, I think, reflect. And sometimes maybe the communication that you're having with somebody else or other people, maybe take that time to reflect and say to yourself, maybe you want to write things down. Maybe you want to record yourself one day. And if you're talking to somebody, now, of course, you don't do it to record somebody intentionally, but you want to do it because you say to yourself, I'm having a difficult time communicating with people, or I'm just not getting through to people, or I have no desire because people aren't listening to me. Maybe try that. Keep it to yourself, record it, and then play it back when you're home, right? And listen to the conversation. See how your response, their response, see the action and reaction. Hear it, rather. And maybe there's something about the way you yourself are communicating or lack of. So I think healthy solitude is good. I think you can take some time to recharge, focus on your brain, focus on yourself a little bit. I think that's very beneficial. Judy, welcome. Judy says in the chats, the world today, more people are disconnected with human communications. It's sad. If they lose the internet, they are lost. That is true. But, what's worse than that, Judy? They are lost, but they don't know how, even if. Matter of fact, it's funny you said that. I keep hearing this commercial. It's a local commercial where I'm from. And I keep hearing this commercial. And it's about electricity. It's a company Yeah, okay, that's what it is. I was trying to think. So they have a bunch of electricians, certified professional electricians, and they'll be there within the flick of a switch, something like that. But anyways, in their ad, and I'm listening to this commercial, it's about generators. I'm sorry, solar powered, generators. So in the ad about the generator, how you never want to lose power, and it talks about how the daughter, she's texting. The son, he's throwing the cat in the dryer. Mom is up doing her hair. Dad's watching the football game, right? So everybody in the household is doing different things. But when the power goes out, everybody gets together. They play a board game, Jenga, whatever, okay? And then they all start to fight. Now, again, this is an ad for a generator, okay? And when the power goes back on, everybody goes back to doing what they're doing. And in the end of the ad, he said the best way, now this is an ad for a generator. The best way to keep the family together is to not be together. So call us for the blood. You never lose power again and be stuck with your family. That's a commercial. And next time it comes on, I'll play it for you. Matter of fact, I'll try to Google it or whatever it is. I'll try to find it. And you may not think it's a big deal. But when I hear this ad, I think it's a big deal. Why is that a big deal? Because this commercial, in my opinion, it's simply promoting that if you lose your power, something bad's going to happen. What's that bad? Oh, no, you have to actually spend time with your family. But you can't do that. Why? Because nobody knows how to communicate. So you better not lose your power, or you're going to have to talk to mom, dad, brother, sister, all that stuff. And that's what's sad, is it's even in commercials for a stupid generator. Now, if I were in the market, I wouldn't go to those people just for that reason alone, because I think it's a very bad it is a misrepresentation, but it just drives me nuts when I hear stuff like that. But yeah, Wow is right, Judy. Well, Cat, that's the whole thing. The ad, he's coming across as being humorous. The problem is, I don't take that as being or having humor. I mean, of course, they depict it much differently than I do, and it's not exactly how I said it, but that is exactly their messaging. And I will try to find that ad and I will play it. And if you're not paying attention to it, you're laughing, oh, ha, 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 son's throwing the cat in the dryer, the daughter's on the phone texting with a boyfriend, mom's doing her hair, dad's watching a football game, whatever, something of that nature. The power goes out, they all start off playing Jenga, and the next thing you know, they're all fighting. So in order to keep a family together, don't be together, all right? And then buy this and such generator. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you're promoting division because you want to sell a generator. And I get it. I understand what the commercial is trying to promote, but I just think that's a horrible way. That's just a horrible way to do it. You know what, Cat? It could be Generac. You could be right. I didn't want to say the name. I didn't want to promote them if it was. But I just think that's horrible. And again, it's that type of communication, or their lack of, it's promoted. I want to read to everybody, and again, this is taken from this college book. Now, I've had this book for a long, long time. I probably read through it countless times. And again, I don't take everything and use it as scripture, okay? I apply certain things, and then I'll read certain things. When I said about professionals, and I said allegedly. What I meant by that is that not that they're not professionals. When I was younger, I went to go see a therapist several times. And I found that the information that they were giving me, or the ways of which I needed to handle certain situations, I found it to be worse. Because I could never understand how another human could give advice or tell me how I needed to act in a relationship or otherwise, when they themselves are just as human as I am. And, it's their opinion. It's not a fact. They don't know me. They only know the situation. And so in my opinion, I never understood, why is it that you have to go through college, spend all this money to get a degree to tell somebody your opinion? And I'm sure there's more to it than that. I'm sure if there is anybody out there listening who has some level of education in psychology is probably wanting to rip my head off. But here's the thing. I have yet to speak to anybody in that field, and I spoke with a lot, who can give me information or guidance that I simply can't give myself. Like, I just never understood that. Because when it comes to communicating, I mentioned earlier that there's action and then there's reaction. So whenever somebody's communicating, however you act towards somebody is how somebody's going to react towards you, right? And, they do play those. I'm sorry, Kat, I was just reading that. Kat says they play those ads there. Okay, so it probably is that company, yeah. Yeah, Paul, you're right. Ads, commercials are also a form of programming. Yeah, but I'll get into that later. You guys be interested to hear how they do that. But for every action, there's a reaction. It's kind of like a positive and negative. I've always said that for every negative, there's a positive. You have to have a balance. Bruce Lee made up that yin and yang in his martial arts. That was literally his symbol in his martial arts, yin and yang. But you have to have a balance, right? You can't just have positive flow of energy all the time. It doesn't work. Okay, it's not consistent. So it's much like a car battery. For every negative, there's a positive, and vice versa. It doesn't mean it's a bad negative. It just means there's a balance. And so when it comes to communicating, I mean, countless books have been written about it. There's countless things you can go online now, for crying out loud, and get therapy for it. And have a complete stranger tell you the best way to act, think, love, feel, talk, communicate. I disagree with that. I strongly disagree with people doing that. And I'm going to tell you why I do. When it comes to communicating with other people, you're either a good communicator or you're not. And either or doesn't make you less than somebody who is or isn't. It doesn't. When you have somebody who has an ability to just talk with anybody, okay? I'm going to give you an example. Somebody who can just talk with anybody, okay? And then you have somebody who maybe they can't talk with just anybody, but they too can also communicate, but they're just not as forward with everybody as that other person is. Well, according to professionals, this person's a better communicator than this person. I disagree with that. Communication, yeah, it's a two-way street, so to speak. However, when you think about communication, it doesn't define it as a verbal thing. I mean, communication is not solely based off of just a verbal thing, right? There's emotional communication. And I think a lot of times, too, people who lack that forwardness of being able to approach somebody else or have long conversations about different topics, it doesn't mean that they're less of a communicator than the other person. You know what I'm trying to say? And so I strongly disagree with that. And again, I'm probably wrong. It's my opinion. Now you have a person who's just not as open as that other person, but they're a better listener. And I think that somebody like that is just as equal as somebody who can talk a lot. See, there's a difference. When you communicate and somebody who talks a lot, is that communicating or is that talking? Because if you define communicating as talking, then I guess that's what it is. Then everybody can communicate. Then there should be no problem. Then why are there books written about it? Why are there studies done on it? Why are there professionals on all about communicating? If talking is defined, though the definition of communicating is talking, well, then I guess everybody communicates. Right? No, wrong. That's not it. When you break stuff down and you take what professionals say and you ponder on things, you got to really rip it apart and say, well, I may not be able to interact with others as well. I can talk. Sure, I can talk all day long. And maybe you're a person that likes to talk over the phone but not in person. Does that mean you're a bad communicator? No, it doesn't. So if it's defined as talking, then I guess everybody communicates. But then the argument comes in and somebody will say, well, Denny, communication is based on a two-way street. One communicates, the other communicates back and forth, back and forth. Again, I disagree with that. If one person is talking, the other person is listening, and thus responds, whether it's a lot or a little, they're still communicating. Or if somebody is upset, crying, and the other person is consoling them, hugging them, embracing them, they're still communicating. Do you hear animals communicate by vocal? No, a lot of times they don't. How do they communicate? Body, action, right? Display. Some dance, some fly. They do fancy maneuvers in the sky or in the water. They're communicating. Are they talking? I don't know. Maybe they are. We can't hear them. Who knows? Humans are unique. We talk. We have that ability to do that. We can decipher. Animals don't, but they still communicate. We know they do. So I think that when the term communication, I think is just, they complicate it too much. I really do. I think that these professionals, they complicate that term too much. And I think it gets confusing for people. Matter of fact, let me read this to you. Just a little blurb here from this book. Okay? I can read it. Thing's so old. It says, assuming meaning. Okay. So it says, it occurs when the receiver interprets what the sender said or did through the filter of the receiver's. Hold on, guys. This is a little wrinkly here. It's an older book, as you can see. Oh, I'm sorry. Through the filter of the receiver's culture. Then proceeds to make a judgment about the sender. For example, a Native American may answer a question from a European American without looking the question over in the eye, or looking at that person in the eyes. European American concludes that they respect in many Native American cultures. The European American's conclusion is an error because it is based on what middle-class European. And it goes on. But the whole point, it says, in other words, the Native Americans' behavior is being interpreted by the wrong set of rules, and a serious misunderstanding has occurred. So, assuming something because you're trying to assume the meaning of what somebody says, okay, it's how the receiver is interpreting things. Did you ever have that happen to you where somebody's saying something, or maybe they're doing something? Let's take the verbal out of it, but maybe they're doing something, and or better yet, they did something. Let's put it in the past tense. They did something, and you interpret what they did, that action. Okay, here we go. That action causes you to have a reaction because you're interpreting the action of somebody, right? So rather than communicating, simplify it, asking that person, what did you mean by doing that? You are assuming that this is what they meant, and therefore you take insult to whatever it is that they did. And so therefore you have a reaction, whatever that reaction is. Maybe it's not a good reaction, but then you judge that person based off of something they did, or put a verbal to it. Maybe they said something, you took it out of context, and now you're assuming something they said. Maybe you're assuming it pertained to you. Maybe you're assuming it could have been, I don't know, judgmental, or many people throw around racist and hatred and everything else so freely now. There's no cap on it anymore. Rather than assuming, rather than not communicating with somebody else, try asking, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? Now, instead of having a bad reaction to something that you assumed, you may have a good reaction to something that you know. See, that's the difference. Communication comes down to more than just talking. Communication comes down to understanding. Okay? Communication comes down to being patient, being open-minded to somebody else's thoughts, opinions, and beliefs, whether you agree or not. And so I think, again, that communication can be so very simple, but I think it's made out to be this scary thing. And for a lot of people today, now, they isolate themselves from it. They don't have to talk to people anymore because they can use the computer. They can use these AI chatbots and do all this other stuff, so they don't have to communicate verbally, emotionally, physically. They just don't, and they isolate themselves. But it can be very damaging. That I do know. Seclusion can be very, very damaging. What about avoidance or withdrawal from communicating? That is something that's consistently not talking to people due to stress, fear, conflict, loss of motivation. Now, that can become very harmful if it's prolonged. Now, that's advanced withdrawal. But this, I don't know for a fact, but a lot of studies have shown that when you stop communicating, we'll throw association in there too. So associating and communicating. That action of you doing that equals the reaction. The reaction are these things I just mentioned, right? There has been cases of people becoming suicidal, sick physically and mentally because they're lacking communication and they withdrew from association. And so they isolate themselves. But then what happens? When they do it for so long and they stay isolated for so long and they're not communicating with anybody, no human, it does something mentally. But then it becomes harder. Did you ever, let's use, because we have a music show on Friday nights, let's say you haven't sang in a long, long time. Maybe at one point you used to go out and sing in front of a live audience. Now, I did, and I can tell you to this date, I don't like to anymore. And it's not because I'm in fear of the crowd or I'm fear of being in front of people. I just have no desire. But let's say that you haven't sang in front of people in 10 years, okay? Your friend calls you up. Hey, we're going out tonight. We're all going to go do karaoke and we're going to sing. Now, it's not that you can't sing. Maybe you have a desire to. Maybe you want to go sing. But because you haven't done that in so long, you have a fear of doing that now, right? And so that is the same thing when it comes to communicating. The action that started it was you withdrawing. Now, the reaction is your fear. Fear is a whole separate ball of wax. But the reaction to that is you're fearful of it, and that applies to communicating. When you stop communicating, you don't have to do it all the time. I try to do it as much as I possibly can. But if you don't do it as often as you can, if you don't relate or associate with others as often as you can, you start to withdraw from it. And then it becomes harder. And then what you do is you find yourself not wanting to talk or communicate or even associate with other people because you start to develop a fear. You see, communication is more than just talking. I said that. And I'll continue to say that. Well, Paula says people hear things and take it personally, assuming it one way or another without necessarily asking for more information for clarity. She goes on to say, we've also been deeply programmed to judge one of the mirrors. Now, I like how she put that in there. We've been deeply programmed to judge one of the mirrors. Now, that's a fact. David, welcome David, says, hi all, was cooking food. We'll be going to open mic soon, but wanted to say hi. Well, David, thanks for stopping by. And I hope that what you're cooking is good. All right? Make it delicious. I'm sure you will. But to Paula's point, yes, it's here's the problem, is that we can all assume all we want. And we can make judgment of others all we want. But to the one-way mirror, you're right. It should be, but it's not, sadly. And I think that we all, at one point in our lives, many times, some more than others, perhaps, but I think we all, by default, we assume and we automatically judge. It doesn't mean, in my opinion, that you're a bad person. I think, in fact, that what makes it better if you can assess that judgment. And that's why I said, if you're finding that you're not able to communicate with people well, or that you're finding it difficult, record it. You know, again, keep it private, but record that conversation. And then when you're in the privacy of your home, listen to the conversation. And perhaps maybe listen to, say, maybe it's one person you're having a hard time with, or maybe it's a group setting. But listen to the recording and try to listen to maybe if it's that one person. If you trust somebody else, say, hey, listen, I just want to play this conversation. Don't listen to the content, but I really want you to hear how they're asking me a question. And don't tell them anything. Say, what do you think about how this conversation went? And get an honest opinion, right? But something that's not biased. But if you don't have that, then listen to it yourself as well. Maybe there's things or your response to how you're communicating, maybe you're coming across as condescending. Maybe you're a know-it-all, but you don't think you are, right? And, maybe there's not a lot of humility in you. And perhaps you're not as open-minded as you thought. It doesn't mean you have to agree when you're having a conversation. So in other words, you can listen to somebody's different points of view. You don't have to side with that point of view. I think if you're listening to them, whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't mean you shut them down, doesn't mean you shut them out. What do? You listen. That's communicating. And I think, again, it's just made to be so complex. Communicating is really not that difficult. However, it becomes difficult when you don't do it. It's like anything else. When you stop doing something for a long period of time, it becomes that much harder to pick up and do again. And communicating is the same way. And again, that could be expression through body language, even laughing. Laughing is a form of communicating. It's not just all verbal, like talk, blah, blah. There's different forms of communicating. Hand shaking is communicating. Okay, winking is communicating. So there's many different forms of it. And so try to understand maybe if this person you're having a hard time with, maybe it could be you. Maybe it's not you. Get a third party or somebody else you really, really trust. But you say, again, don't listen to the content. Just hear the conversation. And don't tell them why. You just want them to listen to it. And then only do maybe 30, 40 seconds of it. Maybe the biggest part you think that it's not working so well for you. And I think what you're going to find is you're going to hear areas that perhaps when this person was trying to give their opinion or sharing thoughts, maybe you just cut them off and didn't listen to them. And you may not think you're doing it, right? So you're not being an open communicator. You're being a closed communicator, meaning when they have something to say, you're shutting them up to get your point back to them again because whatever they're saying doesn't interest you. So, yep. Do you ever talk to somebody that does that? When you start talking, it's yep, yes, and then they go right back to what they were saying again, as if you weren't talking, because whatever it is that you're saying to them is irrelevant. They're so eager to get their point across and make you see their side, right? That, to me, isn't somebody who can communicate well with somebody. That means that they're lacking understanding of really being compassionate and open-minded about somebody else's opinions. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means they're horrible at listening, in that they're not open-minded to receiving other people's thoughts and opinions. Again, it doesn't make somebody bad, right? It just means that they're not as well as a communicator in forms of that. So I think there's a lot of different things you can do if you find it difficult or you struggle to communicate. Because remember, every time you react, every time somebody says something, or I should say, every time there's an action, there's always a reaction. And again, you can reverse it on certain situations. A reaction may cause an action, right? However you react is how that other person is going to act. Or you can have a reaction of a reaction. But I think the big takeaway here, based off of that first part of it, is that when you're communicating with others, just sometimes you don't have to say a lot. maybe just listen. You don't have to be agreeable to everything. In fact, you may disagree with, and you may know exactly what it is. You could have black and white in front of you on ink, and what they're saying is a completely, it's just a lie. That's okay. Let them express themselves. Let them talk about how they feel. Because when you do that, when you start shutting people down and you start pushing people away and you may not realize you're doing it, what happens? Nobody wants to be around you anymore. You may be the greatest person in the world, the nicest person in the world, but they don't want to be around somebody who's a naysayer all the time. People don't want to be around somebody who's not willing to have open discussion. And so I think it's always best just to kind of step back, do a little healthy solitude, right? And just kind of reflect and work on things like that. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with other people. It just means sometimes you just got to be patient and listen to other people. And I think that will also help you out there too. Paula writes, listening with the ear of the ear makes a... Oh, I'm sorry, Paula. Listening to the ear. I was going to say, that didn't make any sense, Paula. I was trying to pick up on it. Maybe there was some cool saying you getting in there or terminology. I understand. Listening with the ear of the heart makes a difference. Pause before speaking and ask, what does love have to say? Or, how would love respond? Then speak from that place of the heart. Excuse me. Paula, you have a very good point. But let me throw this at you, Paula. For anybody out there listening, or maybe they're watching the text, let me throw this at you. So Paula, she says, listen with the heart. She said that makes a difference. And she also says, pause before speaking and ask, what does love have to say? Or, how would love respond? Then speak from that place of the heart. Well, Paula, what if that person, they don't have a kind heart? Not that they don't have a heart, but there's no genuine nature there. They're not receptive to emotion or feeling. And so now, let's just say, Paula, you're dealing with somebody very, very shrewd, okay, where they take them, and I've dealt with people like that, business people. They're just very shrewd, make your point and move on, okay? They don't want to hear a backstory. They don't want to hear emotions. They don't care, okay? How would you handle that? I'm just curious now. You don't have to respond to it, but and the reason I ask that is because Paula makes a very good point, and I think that she's right on with that. But there are people, and quite a few of them, who are just very, very shrewd and to the point, where if they don't want to hear about your bad day, they don't want to hear about the cut that you have on your knee that you got falling up your stairs, right? They don't care. They want to get to the bottom line of the conversation. So I want to hear how one would handle a conversation with somebody like that. How would you communicate with somebody like that? And would it be effective, do you think? Do you think that, to what Paula just said, that speaking from the heart when communicating with somebody, do you think that action that Paula's talking about would have a good reaction, or do you think that it would have a bad reaction? Now, from the recipient, of course, Paula is sending this message out, and the receiver, okay, is the person who I'm talking about. So how would you, anybody, you can type that in or whatever if you want, but how do you think that would work with somebody like that? And second part to that question is, do you think that the majority of people should always speak from the heart, as Paul is referring to? Now, she's not saying be emotional. That's not her point. But she's saying pause before speaking and ask, what does love have to say? And I understand what Paul is saying, but I'm throwing an argument in there. And that argument is there are many people who could care less about that, right? They just want to communicate about one specific thing. They don't want any type of emotion in there. So then how does one deal with a person like that? And you think that having emotion or applying that principle would work in almost every aspect of a conversation or every communication? I'm curious about that. Now, there's no right or wrong response to that. I'll tell you after how I typically handle people like that. But it doesn't mean that everybody can or that everybody does it that way. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do that. And I'll wait a couple of minutes and see if anybody types in, and then I'll give my reply to what Paul said. And I think it's a very good point that Paula brings up. I can tell you personally that when I talk with people, I am more on the fence between both. Okay, so I use what Paul has said. I use that technique, but I also use a shrewd technique. So I'm kind of in the middle of it. But that varies too. Okay, but I always, at first, to Paula's point, I always try to lead with compassion, understanding first. That's my first bullet, if you will. That's what I shoot with. But if that doesn't work, then we try the other approach. David says, I think I try to find a middle ground, a place that we both agree and move forward. Okay. Now see, David's right on that middle. David's right on that middle ground, which is good. But here's the thing. What David's saying, well, what he didn't say is that he tries to find that happy medium. Now, again, it doesn't make what Paula said mute, and it doesn't make it less or more important. And what David said doesn't make his point mute or more or less important. So David says he tries to find a middle ground, a place that we both agree and move forward. Paula's is more of an emotional, not lovey-dovey in a way, but I understand where Paula's coming from. Speak from the heart. What does the heart feel? What does the heart say? And so both points are 100%, in my opinion, right on. And what does that mean? Well, I said a minute ago that you're going to run into shrewd people, and you're going to run into people that they don't care about your day. They don't care, as cruel as this sounds, if you had a loved one just pass away. They don't care if you're sick. They don't care if your dog died. They don't care, right? And so when you run into people like that, it's a stark difference between somebody who is more on the understanding, caring, loving, kind, compassionate communicator versus the ignorant, selfish, get right down to the point, shrewd business type of people. And there are many of them that are like that. So you have your mix. But to both Paula and David's points, okay, the way I handle people as a rule is I base it off of both what Paula and David just said. They almost pretty much nailed my communications down. There are some differences though. But I feel people out, okay? And I will combine it, and I'm sure many of you probably do this. You may do it without realizing it. You can be aggressive. You can be passive aggressive. You can be neither. And I think that the best way to communicate with somebody who is abundantly caring or just has no care at all, I think that really comes down to how much you communicate with others, and how often you do. Because if you communicate with, say, one group of people all the time. Now, I'm not saying go out and get new friends or talk to new people you've never talked to. It's not what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is, if you're not a person who typically talks to a variety of different people, different personalities, different attitudes, different mindsets, it may be difficult for others to just change, switch like that. And so I think when you're dealing with somebody who's shrewd, right to the point, I think you take Paula's approach, but you take it at a minimum. Then I also think that you take David's approach, but you take it at a minimum. And I think that the best thing to do when you're dealing with people like that is that you do less talk. You're brief, you're quick, and you're to the point. But you're not rude, you're not ignorant, but you're not overkind, you're not over nice. The niceties are here, but you're respectful and you're polite. And I think that when you run into people like that, the less of what you have to say, the better it is for you. Now, again, it doesn't make you a bad communicator, it doesn't make you a bad person, but I like both points. And then you have the opposite of that, which is somebody who is overly emotional. And sometimes that can be just as hard to deal with. And so you have the highest and the lowest, right, of both ends. And what happens, when I said in the beginning, is some people, and more so today because of this technology, some people, it's too much for them to handle. So they just say, you know what, I'm done talking, I'm done communicating. And that's all aspects of it. So what do? They just go into this unhealthy solitude where they just block themselves out from everybody because they don't know how to communicate well, or they don't know how to understand people well. And so I think that, again, if you feel that happening, try to, again, my opinion, I'm not a professional here, try doing a little bit, right? Try doing a little bit, even if it's one person, even if it's for 5 minutes a day, because like everything else, it takes a little time to build something back up again. Paula says, middle ground is good. Yep. David, I always try to listen, always, as you were saying. Paula, the key is not to take things personally. That is true, Paula. That is one of the toughest components to communicating. She says, that isn't easy. Often, they are really projecting their own stuff at you. Once you figure out they have fingers pointing back at themselves. Yeah, that's tough for a lot of people, though, isn't it, Paula? Because many people, when they're talking, and I'll give you guys a perfect example. This happens all the time, especially with chatting, texting. When somebody texts something, this is why I always tell people, that could be emails, doesn't matter. I always tell people, if you're uncertain of something, okay, don't assume, okay, because I don't find, in my opinion, texting, emailing, anything that's done digitally, I personally don't see that communicating. I see it called corresponding, but I don't see it communicating. I don't see that. That's me. So when somebody's texting or emailing, you can't put emphasis. Now, you can put all the abbreviations and symbols that you want to try to exclamation your word, emphasize it. That's great. But there's no tone. There's no emotional attachment to that, I guess is what I'm trying to say to you. And so part of communicating isn't, in my opinion, texting somebody. You're corresponding, okay? You're having transcript back and forth. Maybe legally it's a form of communication because it's considered to be a communicative form, all right? But I'm not talking legal. I'm talking human beings, all right? Emotion to emotion. So me personally, I don't take that as communicating. And a lot of times I find that people, they misread a text. They misread an email. You could be joking around saying something. And this has happened to all of us. I don't care who you are. It's happened to every single one of us. Somebody will read it out of context, or they take it out of context. And next thing you know, guess what? Their reaction is, how dare you? Or what did you just say? Or worse. And how do you react? Well, you, of course, put up a defensive posture, and you fire back at them. What are you talking about? That's not what and it goes back and forth, back and forth. And so I don't really take that, I don't take that stuff to heart. If somebody, or if you send somebody a text or an email, and they misinterpret what it says, and then they respond back to you, which triggers you to have a negative reaction, I would suggest that maybe reread or look at your word. As stupid as this sounds, and I have to say it, but as stupid as this sounds, look at what you sent and maybe think to yourself, if I received that message based off of this, that, and the other, how would I have taken that? And then look at how they replied. Maybe that their reaction was based off of what they thought you meant. Now, does it make them right? No, because what they should have done is replied, what did you mean by that? But they didn't. Instead, they reacted, right? So again, that's not communicating, people. That's corresponding. So you fire off in reaction to their reaction. And so I always say, well, if they're sending this back to me, I would reply back to them, or I simply pick up the damn phone and ask. That's even easier, so I can hear. But if you don't, then reply back to them. Are you okay? Are you upset? Did I say something to you? Was there something you didn't understand? And of course, they're going to have to reply back with why they sent what they sent. So then you'll understand, oh, no, that's not what I meant. So this is what I'm saying. Communication, guys, is everything. Talking, verbally expressing yourself, whether it's, again, through body language, emotion, a sigh, a handshake, a wink, a hug, a quick hello, a nice response, right? When you start depriving yourself of those things, you're hurting yourself. Now, again, I mentioned you don't have to do it all the time. You don't need to be consistent, like constant socializing or large groups. I think really what matters more when you're communicating, gathering with others, is it's really quality over quantity. It's not how much, but it's the time that you have that you're doing it and what it is. And so I think the quality of actually communicating and conversating with others, I think that's more important. And again, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a fancy degree to be giving advice. I can only share my opinions with you, which I think are very, very, very well valued here. Okay? There's wrong, and then there's Denny Cool. But even one or two people you can talk to, honestly, that makes a big difference. If you're feeling like not communicating, it's worth asking yourself why. Are you just tired? You need space. Maybe for some, maybe you're avoiding a conflict anxiety. Maybe you're feeling misunderstood. Here's the thing. Communication, it's what a lot of people think, right? If you're avoiding it, maybe you're avoiding something. And you know what the weird part about that something is, guys? It doesn't have to be created by you. That conflict or that avoidance could be something that doesn't even relate to you personally, meaning it's nothing to do with your life personally. There's no attachment to you personally. But there could be something going on, whether you're watching news, okay, or you're associating with other people and you heard something, whatever it is. But it doesn't personally pertain to you, but it's affecting you. And so you're avoiding this conflict. And by not communicating and not gathering with other people, because that action you're taking is causing that reaction. That reaction is by pushing you back and forcing you to step out of socializing with other people, communicating with other people. So maybe sometimes if you're feeling like that, maybe it's not necessarily a personal thing. Maybe there's something that you're doing or listening to that you're trying to avoid. And in your mind, if you disassociate yourself, not communicate with other people, that's the way to handle it. That's how you're going to solve the way you feel. But I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. You're going to make it worse for yourself. And it's going to be that much more challenging to confront situations and to thus down the road communicate and have open relationships with other people, such as friends and gatherings and things of that nature. But I definitely agree that having, to Paula's point, having to take things personally, that's tough. What if you're talking to your mom, your dad, brother, sister, your kids, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, so on and so on. And maybe you come home and your spouse is at home. And maybe your spouse, maybe they had a great day. Maybe they got a promotion. Maybe they just had one of the best days of their life. You come home and you're a train wreck. You're miserable. Your boss yelled at you, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you own your own business and your employees were just miserable. Whatever. You had a heck of a day and you're just not in the mood, right? And so you come home and you are just ready to squash grapes. I mean, but your spouse, he had a great day. One of the best days he ever had. This is where I say, sometimes verbal doesn't necessarily mean communicating. Action, reaction. You come home and immediately your mood, your body language, your size, the rolling of the eyes, the flicking of the shoes, the slamming things down on the counter, avoiding, whether maybe you're in a routine. You come home, give your husband, wife a kiss, whatever it is, say hi, have coffee together, whatever it is. All of that was just avoided. And you went somewhere to be alone. No, there's nothing wrong with time to yourself. Nothing wrong at all. Here's the problem. you're breaking a routine. Okay, you're disrupting a habit. That habit is something that you and your spouse are accustomed to, that perhaps on a regular day you both enjoy, you both look forward to. Now you slam by your husband. We can use the wife. We'll throw both in there. You totally avoid them. Now you just took their best day, their great news, and you just ripped it from them, right? Because you didn't want to communicate. You didn't want to have interaction. Here's what I say. Again, guys, you don't have to be a professional to understand how we as humans react, right? When it comes to communicating and the action and the reactions to this. By avoiding your spouse who just had the best day of their life, by the time you kind of calm down and you get everything back together, and then you go try to have a conversation with your spouse, guess what? They don't want to have a conversation with you. They tried sharing their good day. You just ruined their good day. Now, maybe it's your brother, your sister, your friend, whatever. But the point being is, your destruction to yourself, your attitude, you're communicating that to that person that you care about. And that person that you care about hasn't done a damn thing to you. If anything, he or she probably would have propped you up. Maybe they would have made you feel a bit better. But because you wanted nothing to do with whatever it was that they had to say, and not because they did anything wrong to you, it's just your day, you had a miserable day. Here's the problem with that, though, right? Is that you are taking that joy away from somebody else, but you're deflecting your problems and your attitude and your misery onto that other person. Again, be it spouse, kid, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, I just used husband and wife as an example. It just made more sense. So from my experience, what I have learned is, there is a time to decompress, right? And truly, if the person that you're with and you have that great relationship, maybe take the 3 minutes to say, hey, hon, or a friend, a daughter, whatever, say, guys, I had a really, really hard day today. Can you just give me a couple of minutes? Let me just unwind for a little bit. Right now, I'm just kind of, having a bad day. I just need a little bit of time for myself. Here's the number one thing you did. You communicated, you made it known, but politely. Your day didn't go good, right? And so now the other person, now they may not be excited because they wanted to share something good with you, but guess what you didn't do? You didn't take a wrecking ball to their good day. You didn't ruin their good day. They can still save that happiness and share it with you after. Now, when you calm down and your head's a little bit cleared, now you can get together. And so the point is communicating, again, whether it's verbally, emotionally, through body language, whatever, that goes a long way. And I think that when people do that, and I've done it, my actions by avoiding, and again, it wasn't that person's fault, but because of my action, guess what? The reaction of that, let me tell you something. It was a quiet house for the entire night. And now it put me in a worse mood because I know that I just took something out on this person that didn't do anything wrong. You see, instead of taking those couple of minutes to say, listen, I had a crappy day today. Can you give me just a few minutes? Just give me some time. I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm sorry, but I just need some time right now. And so I think that communicating that way, really, really helps. And I think rather than yelling, screaming, getting upset, or just completely ignoring somebody, I don't think that truly, and you can use that if you want as an excuse. And you can say that, well, when I'm mad, I know people who do that. They get upset and they get up and they physically leave a conversation. Okay? They do. They physically leave a conversation. And Paula, you are very welcome. And Kat, yes, patience is a virtue. But I have been there. I have done it. I don't think there's one person alive that can say they haven't. But I think we can learn from that too. And I think that when we are communicating and when we are trying to understand where somebody else is coming from, I'll go back to a point that Paul said. What if you do take things personally? What if you get hot-headed? Because what if what you're trying to explain benefits that person you're talking to? Maybe this person has some conflict going on in their life, right? And you're trying to help this person, let's just say, whether it be family or friend, and you're trying to help them. And what you find, though, is that this person, instead of listening to you, now, I'm not saying they have to agree with everything you're telling them, but they're not listening. They're kind of, they don't care. Because instead what they want is they just want a solution. They want you to provide. They want you to just give. Maybe it's a self-infliction on their part of entitlement, whatever it is. Okay? And you can feel yourself getting heated. You can feel yourself, oh man, you know what? I'm going to get up and believe me, I've been there. I'm going to get up and I'm going to put this person through this wall. Matter of fact, I'm going to make him part of my wall, or her, whoever. Okay? Now, not that you'd physically hurt somebody, but you get my point. Because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how you say it, okay, you're not getting through. But because of how they're acting, that may trigger you to have a reaction. And by most accounts, and normal accounts, it would cause one to get really, what's what I'm looking for? Impatient. It would, anybody, I think, it would, if you're trying to help somebody, and you're going out of your way, now you're taking your time. Maybe you took a half an hour out of your day. Maybe you took an hour out of your day. But maybe it wasn't the only day you've done this. Maybe it's 2 or 3, 4 times a week that you're doing this. And again, they're just going back to the same thing, And you just say to yourself, you know what? I'm done with this person. You get up, you leave, or you yell, you scream, whatever it is. Does that make you the bad guy? Does that make you the one who's overreacting because the person you're trying to help just isn't listening? The person you're trying to help really could care less because they don't have the patience, the mindset, they don't have the appreciation to understand or accept what it is that you're trying to do. See, they can't see all of that. They only want the solution. They don't want to listen through your sound advice. They don't want to listen through your experiences or what your opinions are that may help them. And again, you're doing this for their benefit. So I'm just curious as to what you would think would be your thoughts, how you would react, and would you judge yourself as being the bad guy because you gave up, or maybe you yelled, maybe you screamed, so would you think of you as saying, I gave it some thought, I overreacted, and I'm sorry, blah, blah. None of that would make you right or wrong, but I think that there's a much better way to kind of handle those types of situations. But I'm curious, though, as to how you would react and to how you would judge yourself. Because you already know what the outcome's going to be, or you assume you know what the outcome's going to be, no matter what you do for this person that you're trying to help. Because you've tried communicating, you've tried going above and beyond, but for some reason, this person isn't reciprocal, and meaning they aren't responding in a way that you want them to. And see, that's the key. I gave you a little hint. All right. So, would you overreact? Would you get mad? And if you did, would you be mad at yourself for getting mad? Would you judge yourself for not being able to help that person? Would you judge yourself and get mad at yourself because you think as if you failed that person? And everything that I'm discussing and sharing with everybody tonight is because I've been through it. I'm sharing personal experiences, and I'm also sharing ways of how I found different techniques and ways to communicate and deal with things that helped. Now, it doesn't mean it works for everybody. It doesn't mean everybody's capable of doing it. It just means I'm sharing my thoughts and opinions on what I find to be the most simplistic way of doing things, rather than overthinking and overanalyzing something. And I think that only comes with dealing with situations in the multitudes, put it that way, okay? In dealing with a variety of different people, again, in the multitudes, like just multiples of people from all walks of life. I've had to do that, and I kind of still do from now, here and there, just not as much. But point being is, everything I share comes from experience. And also, I do a lot of research on different aspects of things that I'm interested in. And again, I could cite you different paragraphs in books after books, psychologists, counselors, all that stuff. And I read a lot of it, and I disagree with a lot of it. I disagree with a lot of modern thinking. Doesn't mean they're wrong, okay? But it doesn't mean they're right, in my opinion, in my view. I think a lot of it's just, I don't know, too opinionated. It's too as a matter of fact. Nobody, no man, no woman, I don't care who it is, knows the heart. Nobody does. If you say you can read people's hearts, you are 100% lying. You can't. You may understand, be empathetic. I'm a very, very empathetic person. I can feel the emotions of people as to how people feel without them even having to say anything. I can literally do it through chats. But it doesn't mean I can read their heart condition. It doesn't mean I know their heart. It just means I'm a very empathetic person. And so I think when somebody says, I know the heart condition, no, you don't. No, you're lying. Right? So I'd just be curious. If that was you when you're trying to help somebody that you truly care about, do you feel as if they're not listening and they're not taking your sound advice? Would you feel upset, mad, betrayed? And would you feel as if you yourself, you're judging yourself and you got mad at yourself and you let them down? Think about that thought. Take a quick commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I am Denny Cool, back from that little quick cool break, of course, from DCG-ENTERTAINMENT, and you are listening or watching Denny Cool on Stumble In. And again, tonight's all about communicating, action, reaction, and we've actually gone a little bit deeper, I think, than that, which is kind of cool, too, because, communicating and the actions and reactions, I think it kind of, it kind of goes deeper than that, right? Because there's a lot to it, but it's not complicated, and that's the whole point of it is that I want to try to share my thoughts and opinions on what I think communication is all about, or what I think it should be. And again, doesn't make me right, but it doesn't make me wrong, because I'm sharing my opinions. And the same with everybody out there. These podcasts that I do are designed for you, the viewer, listener, to come up with your own thoughts and conclusions and share them. And it doesn't make you wrong or right. It makes you have an opinion and an independent thinker, right, with emotion and thoughts. David, have a great time. I hope your food was fantastic, by the way. Paula says, what you're sharing feels like a situation of fight or flight. I've been there. I chose fight and left. Oh, she chose flight. I'm sorry, I thought she said fight. I was like, oh, Paula, get on those boxing gloves. Paula said she's been there, but she chose flight and left. Interesting. That's very interesting. I'd be curious as if to how, like, what would make that conclusion, as to what would cause you, well, I shouldn't say cause, but what would be the ultimate, okay, I'm done. Like, when is that breaking point when you say, okay, you flight, that's it. I'm boarding that plane, that emotional plane, and I'm out of here, right? Because you can't handle it anymore. And I understand that. But what I'm also curious about, too, is if you've been in that situation. Now, again, you don't have to comment. You don't have to share. That's fine. But if you do, that's awesome, too. But if you're in a situation, or you have been in a situation like that, did you get mad at yourself, I guess? Like, maybe judging yourself. Maybe that's too analytical. But how about, did you get mad at yourself, right? Did you get upset with yourself, because you couldn't get through, or this person wasn't listening? Hold on to that thought. Now, you can answer it if you'd like. You don't have to, and that's for anybody. Wait, think about this. So, the first thing is that to feel like that, it's completely normal, okay? And I think that what a lot of people in my situation that I've experienced, and perhaps Paula, or others, I think what we go into when we're trying to help or give sound or good advice, I think what we interpret as being helpful may be the wrong interpretation. What do I mean by that? We think, or I did, was that, well, my advice, the information I'm giving, taking my time, there's good advice, right? I'm going into this thinking that this should help this person to change. But yet they're not. They're not even applying. Now, I'm not saying they have to use every word I'm saying, but like they're just not listening. Well, I think whether we admit it or not, we go into situations like this trying to help people because we think because we're giving good advice that people change. People don't change just because the advice is good. And I think that we kid ourselves because we think people are going to change just because the advice is good. The advice could be fantastic. It could be as solid as a rock, but we think they're going to change just because it's good. I guess you have to think about this. If that was the case, if that worked, if it was as simple as that, right? Where the advice that we're giving is good, and if it worked, then perhaps nobody would make that same mistake twice. We always say you never make the same or don't repeat that mistake, but we do. It's just in a different way, but you still repeat it. It may not be the exact mistake you made, but you still repeat the mistake, just in a different form. Okay, it's just buttered a little bit differently, So I think that a lot of times we go, and I've done that where I've gone in and I'm giving advice, and I'm thinking of the best, most just basic, common sense, reasonable, rational, logical, not too technical advice, but just, man, this is some solid, good advice. And no, they don't change. And so, personally, when I asked that question, I did. I got mad at myself. I got disappointed. Why? Because of that. What I didn't realize was that as good as my advice may have been, this person doesn't want to change. And this was recent, okay? This wasn't that long ago. But I tried. My wife tried. But here's the problem. As good as of advice you can give, that communication has to work both ways. But it's not a communication in the sense that you're thinking where they have to talk back. No. Listening and applying, right? And the body language, the rolling of the eyes, all that stuff, that action triggers a reaction. And in Paula's case, she chose to flight. Well, she chose flight. I didn't. You want to know why? Because there were different aspects of the situation that really bothered me to the point of it went beyond disrespectful. It went beyond arrogance, ignorance, selfishness. And so I took personal offense to that. Now, does it make me wrong for feeling that way? Not at all. No, and nobody would be wrong for feeling that way. However, what I can tell you is that when I thought about it, what I should have done, what I look back now and I think, again, this is why I say it's tough to communicate or to understand certain people or handle certain situations when communicating with others if you haven't experienced it or you haven't gone through it. And so it's easy to give advice, all right? But if somebody hasn't experienced it, they can understand and appreciate the advice you're giving them. But they may not be able to apply it because they have to, I think, in my opinion, I think that they have to experience it. In order to understand, to make it relatable in their mind's eye, they have to see it. They have to feel it, right? But for me, I would say what I didn't look at, okay, was, did this person even want advice? When he would come up to me and he would ask me my opinion on things, okay, but see, I didn't catch that, and I should have, because I'm typically more aware. But I let my guard down. But he would ask me for my opinion on things, and of course I would give it. But I assumed he wanted my advice. Okay? And what I didn't realize at the time, this was a tricky situation. It was more than just about talking with somebody, right? But a lot of times, he just wanted to be heard, and I understood that, and I listened. And I didn't give advice. I didn't give feedback. I didn't give opinion, okay? So I think I handled that, pretty well. And I would always ask, you want my opinion? Or you want to just vent? And so then I would understand where his mind is at, okay? And what that would do, too, is if knowing the person, if he didn't want my advice or didn't want my opinion, then that would save me from frustration, aggravation, of trying to get my point across for his benefit. And so what I've done, or rather what I did is I explained my perspective. I did it honestly, right? But here's where I made the mistake, guys. Here's where I made the mistake. This is where I stepped in it, okay? I repeated myself. I made the point to make my point, because I was frustrated. He was given a certain set of rules and stuff like that. He lived in our home, trying to help him out. But I gave him a certain set of rules. And more than once, he defied them. Point being is, I tried to get my point across too many times, but I repeated myself. And I think I did that because, again, like everybody else, you're human. And so I felt as if we were disrespected. There was no appreciation. Now, I can handle a lot of things, and I'm very tolerant to a lot of things. The one thing I have and I'm going to admit this, my blind spot, my weakness is ignorance. It's disrespect. It's ignorance. I have a hard time dealing with that. A very difficult time, more so than others. But point being is, what I should have done, looking back now, is I just should have said it once, made it very clear, firm, loving, but said it once. Been done with it, okay? And so what I did was, I actually did it to myself. This is why I was asking you guys, and I explained all of that. Did you judge yourself? Did you get mad at yourself? Here's why I got mad at myself, and I felt as if though I failed. Because rather than letting the consequences of his actions speak louder, I tried to reiterate it with my words. And I figured that if I drove the point home long enough, it would sink in. And see, that's where I made the mistake. I spoke too much. I repeated my points too much. And again, it's understandable. We all do it because you're frustrated, right? And so in Paula's case, she chose flight. I chose fight. In the sense that I'm not backing down. You're in my house, my rules. You don't like my rules in my house? Get your own house. Make your own rules. Period. Bottom line. That's how I am. But it doesn't mean that I had to, or that I'm giving in or being cowardice to his situations or bending rules. No. What I learned was I can still be forgiving, because I'm a very forgiving person. I can still be understanding. I can still be loving, but I can also be disciplined, and I can be very structural. But I think that over-structuring, in a sense, where somebody who's not ready or who won't change because you think the advice is good or solid and the help you're giving them will change them, but they're not ready to. So I think that if you believe that, that's good. That's not a bad fault. It's not a bad thing to have. It's not a bad quality. But I think by assuming that just because you're doing that, they're automatically going to change, or at some point they will. No, he made some great strides, yes, but it just kept reverting back to the same old ways. So my point being is, you can only do so much, okay? But I think that the consequences from his actions, they have to take root, unfortunately, right? And so I think by over repeating your rules or your disappointments or whatever it is that you're saying, your great advice, your good advice, and I think that by overdoing it, okay, redundancy, as much as we want to believe that it's helping, if by doing that so much, if it hasn't really done anything, then perhaps take a step back and say, okay, this is the other part now that we have to figure out. This is the hard part. People have to typically learn from the outcomes rather than from words. And I think stepping back sometimes, it isn't giving up. It's recognizing your limits. Stepping back, stepping away from a situation, it doesn't mean you're giving up. No, it doesn't. It just means that you're recognizing that there's a limit. It's like a speed limit. You can only go 55 certain places, okay? And so that was my limit. And I should have stepped back and recognized, you know what, I have a limit. And maybe I did, but I didn't want to accept that. Maybe I felt challenged because I wanted him to succeed for himself as a better person. But I always say this, is that I was very supportive, both my wife and I still, wish nothing but the best. Now, of course, we're no longer dealing with that situation, haven't been for a little while now, about almost 2 months. And so you can still care about people, you can care about situations, you can care about circumstances without endorsing their choices. You know, you can be compassionate for them, but you don't have to agree. You don't have to endorse their decisions. You don't have to endorse their thinking or their stupidity, to be honest with you. And to take it back earlier to what Paul said, don't take it personal. That's why I asked that earlier. Don't take it personal as if you failed. Don't take it personal as if you let somebody down. Know your limits. Know when it's time to say, that's it, I can't do anymore. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't forgive, even if they scarred you, even if they hurt you, upset you. I'm a big believer in forgiveness. It takes some people longer too than it does others. That's okay. But I just don't think that, taking it personally, which is what I did, transparency here, is a good way to go about it. And see, Paula says, I was in the car with someone and literally had enough and got out of the car at a red light and walked away. My grandson didn't need to hear anymore, nor did I. It was simply too much to handle. Yeah, now see, situations like that, that's tough. When you're in a situation like that, see, in Paula's case, I don't know the circumstances, but it sounds like, it was enough for her to do a physical flight. She's not talking emotional. Paul is saying that she physically got out of a situation, walked away from it physically, not metaphorically, but physically, Paula did. And so she walked away from this situation. And by doing so, she had to get herself out of what she felt was a dangerous or could be harmful, whether that be physical or mental. But she also was protecting somebody else, right? Her grandson. And so, there are stark differences between something that is mental, something that's physical. But mental can also be just as damaging, if not more. Because mental abuse or mental distractions can be more detrimental than a physical. A physical will heal. You get smacked in the arm, it's going to heal. It may hurt. You may be mad at that person, but guess what? It's not going to leave a scar, right? A mental scar is tough. It's very, very, very tough. So in Paula's situation, this was more of a physical. And that's understandable, But I think that the whole point of it is you can't take it personal. And so much like what Paula did, I realized that I had to get myself metaphorically and a little physically, but I had to metaphorically get us out of that situation. And I did. At first, I felt as if my communication skills were off. I felt as if my level of advice, of helping, I wasn't there. Wasn't providing adequate help or assistance. But it wasn't until after when I was able to calm down. Remember when I shared about spouse coming home from work, one's in a great mood, the other's not, and then later on, the other spouse who was in a bad mood tries approaching the one that was in a good mood, but because she blew him off, now he no longer wants to talk. See, every action has a reaction. So this is kind of the same principle. In the heat of the moment, I couldn't think clearly, right? So instead of me at that time stepping out of that situation, I mentally stayed in. And then what happened is I just got complacent with everything, but I chose to do that because I wanted to figure out what was going on. Why wasn't this working? And so I blamed myself and felt bad. Then I realized, after much reflection, like I said, take a little hiatus. After much reflection and deep thought, I realized, you know what? This isn't our fault. This isn't my fault. It wasn't me lack of trying this, that. This person isn't ready to accept whatever it is. It doesn't matter who it's from. It doesn't matter how it's given. The point being is that I took it personally, which is something I typically never do. But because of the relationship of the person, I did. And so, again, we all learn. But I think for a lot of people, too, that when you're communicating with other people, especially whether it's family or somebody you're close with, right? There's also a thing called pride. There's also a thing called ego. And so when pride and ego gets in the way, that becomes an issue, right? So I think there's a lot of things we can learn, guys, from communicating. And I think we can learn a lot about ourselves and what actions trigger reactions, whether those are good reactions or bad reactions. Okay, so they're either good reactions or bad reactions. And with all of that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining me, and I appreciate all of the information. Paula, thank you so much. Kat, Judy, David, wherever you are. He's probably out cooking dinner somewhere. Or maybe David went out. But I do thank you guys because, again, I love sharing this stuff, what I learn, and, again, what I experience. And I hope that, if there's something that may have helped you along the way through these few hours, I hope that it did. But again, most importantly, I think it's important to share your opinions. But that's what makes them great, is you're able to share. And again, don't take it personally and try to. I know it's very, very difficult. I know it is. When somebody does wrong by you, and trust me, I can speak from experience, we all at some point will do something to somebody, intentional or not, that will upset them, hurt them, make them angry, okay? Try to find it in your heart, to use Paul's word. Listen with your heart. Try to forgive. It's hard. I know it is. But try to forgive. Because here's what happens. When you hold on to hatred, resentment, it doesn't do you any good. Matter of fact, you're not the person you're holding that hatred and resentment towards and that you're angry towards. They're done. It doesn't bother them. It bothers you. You're the one holding that emotion. You're the one resenting and hating and feeling that and harboring resentment. So it doesn't really help your cause. If anything, you're creating more, right? Again, action, reaction. So try to forgive. Work on that. And I think if you can do that little by little, chip at it a little by little, communicate if you're having a hard time with others. Work on that little by little. Doesn't have to be in long sessions, but do it little by little. And I think you'll find it to be a little bit easier, especially when dealing with larger situations, when you find that you can better communicate and talk with other people and perhaps listen. I think that will help you a long way, especially when dealing with stressful times. Okay, but again, forgiveness, I'm telling you right now, it does the mind and the heart good. Never hold on to anger or resentment, guys. It's a waste of time and energy. With that being said, don't forget this Friday evening is, I believe, it is Rock Ballads. I'm pretty sure for the Friday evening live theme show at DCG-Entertainment. And I will be your live, spunky, entertaining, goofy host on a Friday night. It's my night to unwind, release, and not be myself. All right? And so, again, look forward to the emails for all those members that are out there. They will be sent out probably later on this evening. But I want to thank all of you for watching and or viewing me, Denny Cool, on this chat podcast of Stumble In. So guys, don't forget, please be kind to others, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. I will see everybody Friday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For now, I am Denny Cool, and everybody have an awesome, awesome night. God bless.